Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. Your super chat support is greatly appreciated. If you want to talk about this or any political topic or any topic within reason, you're via super chat, it's greatly appreciated. I'm back full steam, and I'm doing 2 uploads a day and trying to do 2 live streams. We'll have a live stream later this evening as well. Hit subscribe. Let's get started. This is absolutely huge. Washington Times, and you'll hear from Kash Patel in a second. You will hear from Dan Bongino, the Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, in a second. And you will hear also from Devin Nunes. They're very likely going to indict James Comey. FBI looking into off-the-books honeypot operation targeting 2016 Trump campaign. Now, there's possible, they potentially could have indicted Comey years back for leaking classified information when he utilized memos that he wrote to try to start the Mueller probe special counsel. What they're doing right now is looking very likely at anything that is not within the statute of limitations or that is not obsolete because of the statute of limitations. So let's just look at this really quickly. Then you will hear Kash Patel and especially Dan Bongino in a second. But I want to read you this. Washington Times, FBI leadership is starting an investigation into the origins of the agency's plan a decade ago to infiltrate the campaign of presidential candidate Donald Trump using 2 female undercover honeypot agents. The off-the-books investigation, launched in 2015 by Federal Bureau of Investigation Director James Comey, was revealed by an agency whistleblower in a protected disclosure to the House Judiciary Committee last year. Last year. Okay, we just found this out last year. Could you imagine what else we're going to find out, potentially, possibly? And first reported exclusively by the Washington Times in October. In the intelligence community, a honeypot, honeypot commonly refers to an undercover operative, usually a woman, who feigns romantic interest to obtain potential information from a target. The whistleblower said 2 female Federal Bureau of Investigation undercover employees infiltrated Mr. Trump's 2016 campaign at high levels and were directed to act as honeypots while traveling with Mr. Trump and his campaign staff. The Times has learned that the Bureau, now led by Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino, is looking for these once undercover employees under Mr. Comey's direction. The Federal Bureau of Investigation declined to comment. According to whistleblower disclosure, the Times reviewed the investigation differed from Crossfire Hurricane. A later FBI counterintelligence operation looked into never-proved allegations that the campaign was colluding with Russia. So all of this, of course, was complete and utter nonsense. None of this took place. Paul Bartlett, thank you. Thank you, Paul, to my super chat. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Let's get to what Director Patel just stated today. The American people will get a Federal Bureau of Investigation that's transparent, accountable, and committed to justice. Just like when I exposed the grotesque violations and fraud leading to the House Intelligence Committee's investigation into Crossfire Hurricane calling out corrupt actors, I will equally defend those attacked falsely, especially as your FBI director. A female agent was falsely referenced in media this week as part of an alleged disclosure. She was not a honeypot. I have reviewed the matter again. She did the limited job assigned to her. These actions were also reviewed by the special counsel, John Durham, and he found no evidence of wrongdoing by her. This agent dedicated her life to public service, and I will have her back for it. I will always be the first to push for accountability from within. My track record has established that, but we do not establish guilt by association in this Federal Bureau of Investigation. Stay the course and abide by our high standards, and I will always have your back. Deviate in any way, you will not be part of this FBI. She is here to stay. So that's the type of FBI that we're going to have now. Not the, public relations driven, left-leaning, ideological, Democratic Party aligned intel agency. But let's get started. Dan Bongino, Comey is an embarrassment to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Let's go ahead and get started.
The Dan Bongino Show, the podcast that's so successful, and he joins us now to react to all of this. What'd you think about the mafia boss connection?
You know, Ainsley, for a guy who's 6'8", Jim Comey could not have looked any smaller last night. What a petty, small man. A mob boss. When I was a Secret Service agent, Ainsley, we used to go in the boss's office all the time. And he would say, we're in this together. It's a team. Inferring that there should be some loyalty to the Secret Service and the cause. That Jim Comey went out there and used expressions used every day in private and public practice across America. And to use it to infer that the president is a mob boss, to compare him to killers, people involved in racketeering. What a disgusting thing to say. Jim Comey should really slither away. He's an embarrassment to the FBI.
Well, one of the things, Dan, that is understood at the FBI is you never talk about an ongoing open investigation. And yet there he was on TV last night talking about all these open investigations. I mean, doesn't that fly in the face of everything that he says he stands for?
Steve, yes, he can't seem to get his story straight about what he wants to do. What he does is he selectively keeps certain things quiet when he can use them to leverage them against the president. It is clear as day he can't stand Donald Trump, that this is personal. Steve, there was one thing, too, about this interview yesterday that jumped out at me, too. He said at one point, after every conversation, did you notice they kept playing that B-roll? I go home and I typed on the computer and they showed the blanked out computer.
Right.
Really? He reminded me of a kid who rats on his brother because he got gum in his hair or something like that. He didn't do this for Barack Obama. I mean, how pathetic. You took notes on every meeting with the president?
He was also so-called showboating during the Bush administration. He was very put down to President Bush. He said President Obama used his sense of humor to build people up, and he would always point it at himself because he was so confident and humble, where George Bush would use it to dig at other people, which showed an insecurity. I'm thinking to myself, wow, he's Dr. Drew, and he was a former FBI director. Meanwhile, let's talk about the other news that got smothered, and that is the IG report that had Andy McCabe confirmed to lie 4 separate times during this investigation. Luca, go between the lines on this.
Well, there was a huge bombshell in that report, by the way, and hat tip to Christian Adams for pointing me to it over the weekend, where at one point a Department of Justice attorney calls McCabe and starts kind of putting the squeeze on him to make this Clinton thing go their way. I mean, how did that get lost in the weekend news? That is a mega story in and of itself. But story number 2, and by the way, if you donated to Andy McCabe's legal fund, put a hold on that credit card charge right now, because get your money back. At one point, apparently, he authorizes a leak and then calls 2 senior FBI managers to ream them out for the leak he caused.
Do you believe that?
What kind of a character-free person do you have to be? I scratched my head this has got to be a new low.
And who gave him permission to do that leak? He says he got permission. Who gave him permission?
And then he lied to Comey, too, which is fascinating. So, I mean, that story was full, and I encourage you to go look at it, of just really serious allegations.
Right.
So any alleged honeypot scheme that Comey directed, Andrew McCabe was a part of almost certainly. So James Comey potentially, possibly, will be indicted. He's potentially under investigation. And I use the word potentially because when Comey was asked, I believe it was by Jake Tapper, would he testify against Andrew McCabe? This was on CNN years back. He said potentially, possibly. So, I mean, now all we heard 6, 7, 10, 8 years ago, everyone's going to flip and sing on Trump, but Trump didn't commit a crime. You see, Bill Maher, he's great, but Bill Maher, on his podcast recently said, well, Trump committed crimes. Trump committed no crimes. That's why he was never imprisoned. He committed no crimes. The Supreme Court will overturn the absurd ruling in New York because a state cannot unilaterally decide what an FEC violation is without the Department of Justice involved, and the FEC and DOJ dropped the stupid hush money case. It wasn't a crime, and former Federal Election Commission chairman have stated what Trump did was not a crime at all. He could have paid Stormy with dollar bills. So Trump didn't commit any crimes, didn't try to overthrow the government, didn't try to pressure anyone. As they use these broad, vague, ambiguous terms, he tried to pressure people. Yeah, the Democrats, that's all. Their entire lives are pressuring people. They don't even go to Thanksgiving. Okay? You're talking about like some, a majority are wonderful people, but some are so petulant, they won't go to Thanksgiving. But the point is, you actually have people who committed crimes. Dan Bongino is now the deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is like a dream come true. All of the people from Comey, McCabe, all of these former agents, Strzok, all of them potentially and possibly committed numerous crimes. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. And they were protected. They had such power. And if they potentially committed those crimes, then it's very likely they're going to get indicted, prosecuted again, depending on the statute of limitations. Some of these crimes don't really have statute of limitations from what I understand. But let's go ahead really quickly and let's go ahead here.
Service agent Dan Bongino. Dan, great to see you. Could you believe the arrogance of that person? He doesn't realize we know what he did, and we know when he did it.
Yeah, Lou, the euphemisms game, spying, surveillance, unauthorized, undocumented viewing of people, whatever you want to call it, is a magic act for idiots. And Comey likes to play that little game with people. Everybody's called this spying, Lou. Spying, as Bill Barr said appropriately, is a fine English word that describes exactly what happened. And let's just be clear here, Lou. The evidence is overwhelming that Jim Comey's a liar. They used national security letters. They used foreign spies to gather intelligence on Trump. That's already been reported on other outlets, by the way, left-leaning outlets, right? They used the FISA court, otherwise known as a surveillance court, a synonym for spying.
What does that mean? It's been reported on left-leaning outlets. It's been reported on this outlet, which is not left-leaning.
I'm just talking about the foreign spying.
Oh, I see.
Everyone from the New York Times on. The Guardian and CNN have already reported a year ago on the fact that foreign spies, yes, spies, Lou, were feeding information to spies in the United States about the Trump team. I can pull the article up on my phone right now and show it to you. It's out there for everyone to see. Not to mention one final point. They used an actual spy in Stefan Halper, already reported on by the New York Times. I don't know what Comey's doing. His legacy is already a stain on the FBI.
Because he's doing the same thing. He is sitting there, this nonsense, talking about we investigate, and then you hear Comey parroting all that he said before the committee yesterday. Debating the semantics, the etymology of, all of this. These people are out of their minds. Who do they think they're kidding? And when Bill Barr said a perfectly good Anglo-Saxon word, I wanted to cheer because he's speaking plainly, directly, because he has a high IQ and the ability to do so. These idiots who run around spewing Latin derivatives are usually just that. I won't repeat the word that I just used.
Yeah, the shame of this whole thing, Lou, and I'm with you 100% on this. I'm glad you brought this up about Christopher Wray yesterday. He sold us out. There was absolutely no reason to play this game. Christopher Wray is one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the cosmos. he had the ability yesterday to reestablish faith in the FBI and come out and say, listen, a very simple answer, Lou. All he had to say is there's an investigation going on right now into spying. Yes, spying, an appropriate English word. We're looking into it. And Miss Shaheen, who he was talking to, the senator, Democrat senator, when I get to the bottom of it, I will be back here and happily talk about it. Instead, what does he do? He does the Comey euphemisms game. I wouldn't use the word spying. They were perfectly content with using the word spying every other time when they were talking about the Patriot Act with George Bush. It's ridiculous.
So
he disappointed me yesterday.
What do you think of the Cadillac memorandum of the State Department? And they sealed it. Christopher Wray took responsibility for sealing it 2 weeks ago. And instead of sharing the documented knowledge firsthand of the fact that the Steele dossier had a political motivation, and yes, a deadline of November 6th, I believe it was, 2016. All of this has been sealed for 25 years by that same FBI that was engaged in spying.
Yeah, no worries, Lou. Christopher Wray said we can see the Cadillac memo in 2041. I could be dead by then, God forbid. 2041, the Cadillac memo, so the audience totally understands and completely gets what this is. This is proof positive that the United States government knew Christopher Steele's information used to spy on Donald Trump was political information. It was not legitimate intelligence. They knew it before the FISA was issued. And now, Lisa Page's testimony, the FBI lawyer who was working on this, makes a world of sense when she seems genuinely surprised under oath in Congress that the same source they were using, Steele, was also reporting to places like the State Department and I believe reporting to the CIA too. John Brennan was the puppet master of this whole thing, and I believe he played the FBI for fools, and Comey bought into it.
Yeah, you know, and I haven't ruled out a strong role for the British government yet either. And my guess is you haven't either.
No, Lou, but that's not even in dispute. I don't know why. Why would you even rule that out? The Guardian and CNN, of all places, have already reported on this. You know, the fact that the British fed intel to the United States government about the Trump team is not in dispute. I don't even know why this is controversial. CNN is not retracting their story.
The issue is that John Brennan, under oath stated, I don't do evidence, I do intelligence. I don't do evidence, I do intelligence. In his wonderful transatlantic accent, I don't do evidence, I do intelligence. I think it was a HuffPost clip. You can find it on YouTube of John Brennan stating, I don't do evidence, I do intelligence. And that means that he doesn't do evidence. He does what's called intelligence, which can be anything. It could be, WMD that doesn't exist. It could be the Gulf of Tonkin. It could be anything that is made up. It could be a pretext to do anything they want, or anything the administration wants at that point. So there was never not a shred of evidence that Trump worked with the Kremlin. Okay? If another country gives us intel, that's meaningless. Intelligence is supposed to be used oftentimes, almost always during wartime, or to prevent wars, or to find out what a foreign adversary is doing. Has absolutely nothing to do with setting up and framing a former, a current candidate in President Trump. At that time, he was a candidate. So the peaceful transfer of power that Democrats always talk about, they're the ones who actually, that terrible day in January, that had nothing to do with impeding any transfer of power. Okay. What Democrats did was not only impede a transfer of power from Obama to Trump, but what President Obama did was allow his intelligence agencies, or lead his intelligence agencies, to accuse an incoming president, of being a spy, of being an operative, of working for another country, of being disloyal. That's never happened before in American history. That was the first time. And then the rebuttal is, well, we've never had a reason to distrust somebody. No, we've had reasons to distrust people, but that's not what we've done as Americans. We've never accused an incoming candidate who won the presidency, a duly elected president, of being an operative of another country. So Democrats created a new Cold War, and then they pontificate about all the conspiratorial theories pertaining to a man who couldn't even communicate winning, the most ever, being even more popular than President Obama, and then less than 4 years later being kicked out because Democrats were so embarrassed of him, even George Clooney was. But anyway, let's continue.
I just wanted to see you go bananas.
Yeah.
I can't.
Hold on one second, ladies and gentlemen. This also is a good clip. So this is the federal, coming up, the Federal Bureau of Investigation Deputy Director, Comey. So, Dan Bongino. So Kash Patel is going to get a lot of input from Dan Bongino. We'll get to Kash Patel in a second. But everything that I've been saying, ladies and gentlemen, I wrote about this in the Federalist. You can just type in H.A. Goodman Federalist. Everything that I've been writing about, ladies and gentlemen, talking about for years and years on this channel and in my writing, you've been listening to, I've been telling you what's taking place, and now we're going to see what Democrats like to call a reckoning. They wielded political power in a manner that was not only deceitful and unethical, but was truly un-American. Okay, now you have like AOC and others, oh, they're trying to weaponize things against us. Like, no, the only reason they're using the term weaponization is because Trump did. That's why they're saying, oh, Trump's afraid of the Epstein files. Like, no, that villain, that lunatic, was a liberal Democrat who literally had a painting of a Democratic president in a blue dress in his home. Okay, you can look it up, New York Post, it's all over. Okay, gave primarily to Democrats, and so much so that the state of New York couldn't even indict him, couldn't even get a grand jury to indict him. Okay, so give me a break. Anyway, and then they're like, oh, look at that picture of Trump and him. It's like, there were more pictures of that guy with Democrats, certain Democrats in particular, and Trump had a plane. He didn't have to fly on someone else's plane. The way Democrats work is they become wealthy by hanging out with wealthy people. Trump becomes wealthy because of real estate, hotels, casinos, golf courses, The Apprentice. He doesn't need politics. Okay? So, anyway, let's continue.
New York City cop, a former Secret Service guy. He hosts the wildly successful Dan Bongino show. It's over on CRTV. So, Dan, what do you make of the fact that the president has called up the National Guard? Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, they're ready to send folks. Iowa, Ohio.
Is entirely political.
Investigation since the 2016 election. What's going to be happening over the next couple? A lot of the narratives with this investigation since the 2016 election. And then we have Loretta Lynch, curiously, going to sit down for an interview today to talk about a lot of things, including her tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton and what she actually said to James Comey. What are you going to be listening for?
I'll tell you, I'm going to be listening for every word.
So, by the way, the hilarious debacle there was James Comey, I believe, blamed Loretta Lynch for writing the Comey letter. Or no, sorry. James Comey blamed Loretta Lynch for something to do with the Clinton email investigation turning out the way it did. Okay. And, of course, Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton met on a tarmac with the Attorney General Lynch, while I believe the agents involved in setting up Trump were interrogating, or let's say having a nice lunch and relaxing with Madam Secretary. So Madam Secretary is being interviewed, probably the most polite and wonderful interview in the history of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And during the interview, or that's the same time, the Attorney General is literally meeting with Bill Clinton. And of course, they spoke about golf, Brexit, and grandchildren. And God bless the memory, the soul of the man who broke the story. I don't believe he's with us any longer, but, God bless him for doing that. That's one of the most, crucial, important stories. I mean, that's what a true journalist does. Okay. So the man who broke the story, the tarmac story, was a true journalist. Okay. And by the way, a true journalist, if Trump had the same type of thing where he's being investigated and then, Pam Bondi meets with Melania, then you know what? That story should be talked about. Not a dossier that accuses Trump of complete nonsense that literally Clinton purchased. So it's like media, intel agencies, government in general, bureaucracies have been weaponized against Trump. Now that Trump has virtual total control of everything now, because Democrats were so inept, they tried to ruin him, and they accidentally, thank God, gave him like a lot more control than he would have had he won in 2020. But anyway, let's continue. I'm getting lost in the weeds here. Hit subscribe if you're new. I'll be back tonight, I think around 11 or so. And Super Chat, thank you. Paul Bartlett, thank you so very much. Via Super Chat, if you want to talk about anything, let me know.
Out of her mouth, because Loretta Lynch should be talking to a lawyer, and so should Jim Comey. They shouldn't be talking to the American public about book sales and interviews. Brian, I believe they may have some very serious criminal liability on potential obstruction of justice charges based on their handling of the Clinton case. But here's a couple of questions for her. Number one, why did you ask them to refer, Jim Comey that is, to the investigation into the Hillary Clinton issue as a matter? It was not a matter. It was an investigation. And secondly, what did you do to authenticate the information that came in on the dossier? The Department of Justice had a role in that, in the Woods procedure. What did she do? What did she know? And when did she know it? She may be in real trouble here.
Yeah, and you've got these dueling narratives. You've got her trying to explain on NBC Nightly News tonight her story, her side of the story, and then you got James Comey coming out with his book next week. Neither one of them are under oath on television or in a book, so it will be interesting to see what kind of yarns they're going to spin.
Yeah, but they are public statements, and those statements will unquestionably be used later if they tell a different story under oath later on. That's the important part.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've talked a lot about Twitter, and Twitter has been banning, or has gotten a lot of flack for shadow banning conservatives when they retweet, and so that other people can't see them. Well, now the CEO, he liked an article that was on Twitter from a publication called Medium. The CEO, Jack Dorsey, he liked this article, which was suggesting that Democrats start a civil war, and he wrote, "Great read." What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm really sick of Twitter. I mean, I have to be there. I'm in the content production arena like Fox is, and I have to be on it. But every minute of it is troubling to me. It is not to steal the liberal snowflake term, it's not a safe space for conservatives anymore. I was banned, guys, from running ads for, quote, inappropriate content. I have no idea what that means. We scoured our Twitter feed. They've never told us what it means. I think PragerU, Dennis Prager's place, had some problem with this too. You know what inappropriate content is on Twitter for guys like me? Being a conservative. Mm-hmm. That's what's inappropriate content. It's really, I tell you, every conservative out there, start working on an alternate plan, because they're going to come after you next.
Well, you're not alone.
Neil Ferguson of the Hoover Institute came out and said Silicon Valley is embarrassed the role they played unwittingly to help Donald Trump get elected, and they're going to overcompensate in the midterms, and look out. And guess what? It's happening.
Yeah, it is happening. Look at that article about Ted Cruz. He
to get our legal experts' thoughts on what.
So, I mean, you know what? there's so much that we don't know. And again, just, potentially James Comey potentially didn't do anything wrong. Maybe Andrew McCabe, James Comey, Peter Strzok, all these people, John Brennan, maybe they did nothing wrong at all. Everything was legal and above board. That's a possibility. Okay, what's the likelihood? The likelihood is that they bended. At best, they acted at best for them, they acted in an unethical manner, utilizing their post to go after a political opponent, which is also illegal, but at worst, they committed crimes in the pursuit of trying to ruin a political opponent. So they might have committed crimes trying to ruin and destroy Trump, his president, or his candidacy, his presidency. And this is how inept Democrats are. The Democratic Party is so obsessed with political power that had they simply, let's just say, not worked as hard to catapult Biden into the White House, they wouldn't have had any of this stuff. You'd still have USAID. You'd still have the same type of Federal Bureau of Investigation. You'd still have the same type of department. William Barr and all these people still would have been there. I mean, the system that Democrats tried so desperately, that never Trumpers tried so desperately to keep intact, that it would have remained. None of this would have taken place. But we had 4 years of Weekend at Bernie's. And, then, even, what's his name? George Clooney was so embarrassed. He wrote, oh, yeah, Biden, for the good of the country, should step down. What does that mean, for the good of the country? Oh, you're mortified that finally the whole world sees him in a debate performance? The poor man, God bless him. I mean, probably committed many crimes, but that's why he preemptively pardoned everybody around him. But, don't like to see anyone suffer that way. But Democrats didn't care. They just wanted a pulse. So and then America had enough. Trump won the popular vote. Every battleground state did better than any Republican in a generation. And now everything's being dismantled. Let's continue.
Now I want to get our legal experts' thoughts on what's next for James Comey. Harmeet, we've been discussing this here tonight, the arguments one way or another, but in the real world, what do you think needs to happen?
Well, what needs to happen and what will happen in the real world are probably two different things. But James Comey knows himself very well that some of the things he's been accused of tonight and in the press are things that he's prosecuted other people for. So, for example, Sandy Berger is a figure out of the Clinton's past who actually stuffed documents down his pants in the National Security Archives and then got away with them. And then he was ultimately given a slap on the wrist when James Comey held the position in the Department of Justice that Rod Rosenstein does today. That's in 2004. So he knows people can be prosecuted. He's prosecuted them for doing similar things. But in the real world right now, where we have a attorney general who's recused, we have a deputy attorney general under fire from the president and under pressure from many people to resign or step aside, who would prosecute him? I think the proper place to be prosecuted would be by line attorneys in the Department of Justice.
Well, see, now the question is not who will prosecute him. The question is actually who will, because there are people there at the Department of Justice. You have Kash Patel, you have Dan Bongino, you have Pam Bondi, and I believe Devin Nunes is serving as an advisor. I mean, you literally have everyone who has suffered in some way, shape, and form from the prior leadership at the Bureau. I mean, they really need to get Carter Page as an advisor and, George Papadopoulos. I mean, it's like the people who wielded such power are now going to, if they committed crimes, again, it's likely Comey committed numerous crimes. There's a chance he didn't. Okay. I think that the plan is, I think from what I've read at the Washington Times articles, that they're planning on indicting James Comey and possibly McCabe and others. Again, well, McCabe, that was another thing, but James Comey.
And definitely not a special prosecutor. I think what we've seen here historically is that special prosecutors are loose cannons that go in search of crimes and are often overturned on appeal. So I don't think that's a good use of resources.
So let's just explore that. I want the audience to be absolutely clear what you're saying, that if the view is that he has potentially committed crimes, and we've certainly heard that view put here tonight forcefully, if that's the case, then he should be prosecuted. Who exactly should take the lead in making that happen?
Well, it would be somebody in the Department of Justice. Now, a cautionary note here is that what we're seeing is almost an arms race and escalation of the political crime prosecution and process crimes. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing for the country, because there can be a line between what you think is the right thing. I think Comey's clearly on the wrong side of it, but the problem is that if you prosecute him, the ante is upped for the tables to be turned in the next administration. I'm not sure that's a great use of our resources.
What's your view?
Well, my view is we're not done collecting the information. And as he goes on this book tour attempting to monetize and cash in on his allegations, there's more things he's going to say that may backfire on him. And what we know is often the fastest, best way to a prosecution is false statement. And one of the surest ways to prove that is when the subject contradicts himself or is contradicted by others. So, for example, Comey comes out and says, yeah, politics was a factor in my decision this October. How does that hold up with other statements we make? And he's not just being contradicted as he gets out there, capitalizing on his book tour, by the President of the United States. Loretta Lynch has now come out and directly contradicted one of his accounts. So this saga is to be continued, not just in terms of where the prosecution efforts might go, but the information being generated about Comey and the potential for false statements.
And Andy McCabe has also accused him of lying. And so we've seen in the Inspector General's report that just came out that McCabe's attorneys have said that Comey should not be believed. Comey did authorize him talking to the Wall Street Journal. And there's that. And then you also have Senator Grassley, who has written to Rod Rosenstein, saying, let's talk more about these 7 classified documents, and we want some more details. Did he give them? I don't think it is clear at all that he simply gave an excerpt to his friend. His friend retroactively claimed attorney-client privilege. There's a lot of hinky stuff going on there. We aren't even close to being close to the fact-finding there.
So the issue there is that Andrew McCabe and James Comey, I don't believe they're listening to the Dionne Warwick song, That's What Friends Are For. I don't think they're best friends forever anymore. Okay? So this is a huge, huge deal. I mean, there's going to be a lot of, and you don't need a special counsel too. You don't need a special counsel. They have the information. And here you have Kash Patel, who, again, with Bongino, was investigated by the same people he's likely to indict.
Most of the DOJ's search warrant affidavit, which supposedly justifies the completely indefensible FBI raid in Mar-a-Lago, has been redacted because you don't have clearance. You can't see it. But one name that is prominently featured, not redacted, is that of Kash Patel. He's a former chief of staff at DOD from the last administration. So immediately after the affidavit was released with his name unredacted, Peter Strzok, maybe the most famous FBI agent in modern history, tweeted this directed at Kash Patel, and we're quoting, "Never great to see your unredacted name in a search warrant affidavit. Get a great effing criminal defense lawyer, you're going to need."
So now Kash Patel is literally the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Okay? And then you have and then you have Dan Bongino as the deputy director. It is the worst nightmare of the previous regime, let's just say. Okay, but anyway, let's continue. Louis Gohmert has a very amusing exchange with Peter Strzok in Congress. But anyway, let's continue.
So here you have permanent Washington threatening someone on Twitter. But that's totally cool because Orange Man bad? Like, what? So we thought we would like to speak to Kash Patel himself. He's president of the Kash Foundation. He joins us tonight. Kash Patel, thanks so much for coming on. If I were...
By the way, Howie Brown, thank you, Howie. Greatly, greatly appreciated. I really appreciate that. Very generous of you, and thank you so much. Howie, thank you. To the members on this channel, thank you. Super chat, thank you. Let's continue.
For you, I hate to say this to you, but I would be very concerned about a tweet like that from a lunatic like Peter Strzok.
Well, you know, Tucker, as a former national security prosecutor and as the lead investigator for Russiagate, my investigation that I ran with Devin Nunes is the reason Peter Strzok got fired, along with 16 other FBI officials, including Andy McCabe, Lisa Page, Comey, and the like. And their corrupt cabal is back, being escorted out the door, as you just reported on Friday. So the corruption continues, and their bias and their hypocrisy knows no bounds. But of course, they're shameless. As a former national security prosecutor, and Peter Strzok, as a counterintelligence head agent, knows that American citizens' names and search warrants are supposed to be redacted. This DOJ, with the same leadership that authorized the Russiagate, is now back in charge, had gone in to intentionally lift the redaction of just my name and then redact the next 7 consecutive pages. It was totally for political purposes. They don't care about the threats to my life, the racist message, and the hatred I see every day now, because they are publicly advertising for me to fail, to go to jail, and to be harmed. And here's another thing. The FBI did this after a 10-month investigation into death threats from the January 6th subpoena committee on me, and on Friday, the same day they issued the affidavit, is the same day they ended the investigation, saying even though they had credible evidence, we could go no further.
It's just beggars belief. So one of the highest ranking officials at the FBI is threatening you on Twitter. Where's the current FBI director to call Peter Strzok and say, hey, you can't do that because you eliminate all public confidence in this agency when you do?
Well, the current FBI director, Chris Wray, was the FBI director when we ran the Russiagate investigation, and he had the opportunity then to expose all the corruption at the FBI, and he failed, and he's been covering up since. Look, we said since the beginning, we got out 60% of the documents for the Russiagate investigation. 40% remained. President Trump declassified those specific documents, and this entire raid on his house, I believe, was to prevent the disclosure now that the government gangsters are back in charge of their corrupt activities from Russiagate on down, because now that they have an open FBI counterintelligence investigation, they will shield any release of documents because they will say we have an open investigation. Congress has a lot of work to do, and I'm glad whistleblowers are coming forward. They need to be doing so in droves.
This behavior is just so over the top. The next time a prominent critic of the FBI has kiddie porn found on his laptop or fentanyl in his car, I don't think anyone's going to believe it's real. That's how corrupt it seems to me. And we just wish you absolutely the best, Kash Patel. You have a
president. That's their viewers who in our nation's capital. Those a lot of connections to the Brookings Institute, which for those of your viewers who don't know what this is like the prominent left-wing think tank here in our nation's capital. And we think there's a connection between the president of Brookings and those dossiers that were given to the State Department that mirrored the Steele dossiers, which, look, all of this, what does this mean?
So basically, Kash Patel was investigated, Dan Bongino was investigated, I believe Devin Nunes, they went after him. Literally everyone that was investigated is now running the DOJ, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Pam Bondi wasn't investigated, but all the top officials who understand, how like these organizations could truly be weaponized. When AOC, for example, who might have years back committed crimes possibly pertaining to FEC campaign violations, possibly, potentially. Hans A. von Spakovsky wrote about that. But anyway, when AOC says, oh, the DOJ is being weaponized against me, it's like, no, you're telling people, and if it's AOC and if it's other Democratic congresswomen, if you're telling people how to evade ICE, like literally telling people how to evade and circumvent law enforcement, you've probably committed a crime. Now, knowing your rights is different. But if you're masquerading as trying to just inform people of their rights, like let's just say AOC is, trying to tell people, oh, well, here are your rights. But inadvertently, she's breaking the law. It has nothing to do with free speech. If she's literally saying, okay, here's how you circumvent, deceive, or lie to law enforcement. That could be a crime, okay, not covered under the First Amendment. But again, the Democratic Party is so all over the place. There's literally there are very few things that they truly believe. It's just a giant quest for power. That's why you have Liz Cheney and AOC on the same political side. Okay? People criticized me for going from Bernie Sanders to Trump, but there are like 10 correlations. There are like mainly the anti-war stance or the anti-perpetual war, which, by the way, Bernie is not. He's a part of a system very corrupt. He's like a tool of the same system he claims to be against. They cheated him. He didn't even bring it up. Then he fomented a McCarthy era, propping up the same system that sends Americans to never-ending wars. But if you voted Bernie Sanders in 2016, and I was the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post, and the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. I wrote a Federalist article explaining how you go from Bernie Sanders to Trump, mainly foreign policy. But again, it's too difficult for the morally superior to understand. It's apparently they either lack the knowledge or lack the intellect. Who knows? And then, like, in terms of immigration, they were very similar, too, interestingly enough. But economics, we had record low poverty with Trump. We had record highs in household median income, and the working class loved Trump. If you're like a communist or a socialist or a far left, you talk about the working class. These are your, buzzwords that you love to use. The working class loves Trump, loves Trump. For obvious reasons. We had hundreds of thousands of new manufacturing jobs with Trump. But anyway, let's continue.
This was the Clinton campaign's dossiers. It was the dirt. It was a phony story that they sold not only to the American people, but they sold it and corrupted our FBI, where it appears like these dirty cops were more than willing to take this information and present it to the FISA court.
Yes, that was Congressman Devin Nunes on this program back in 2020, exposing direct links between the Brookings Institute and Christopher Steele's fabricated dossier, which was bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton and her campaign and the Democratic National Committee. Last week, Steele's primary subsource, Igor Danchenko, who was also an analyst at Brookings, was arrested and charged with 5 counts of lying to the FBI. The third indictment in special counsel John Durham's probe. He has since pleaded not guilty. My next guest took the depositions of several of the players who were pushing the phony Russia collusion lie. Former Pentagon Chief of Staff Kash Patel joins me right now. He, along with Devin Nunes, cracked open this case 3-4 years ago. Kash, it's good to see you this morning in a snowy Pennsylvania. Great looking shot there.
Great to be with you, Maria. Thanks so much for having me from Happy Valley.
So, Kash, connect the dots for us. You heard Devin talking about the Brookings Institute. I'll bring up the graphic of Durham's indictment of Danchenko. Talking about Danchenko working as an analyst at Washington-based bank think tank, which is the Brookings Institute, where he focused on Russia and Eurasian geopolitical matters. Tell me about the connection that Danchenko had in Brookings.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. And
by the way, Danchenko wasn't convicted, and a lot of these people were not convicted because you were not going to get a conviction with William Barr and the former FBI leadership. So let's just say the social club, it's a social club. There are now new members of the social club, completely new members. Okay, and there's a new sheriff in town. Let's just put it that way.
Let's front load the conversation, Maria. John Durham issued subpoenas to the Brookings Institute. I don't think most of America knows that, but he actually issued federal grand jury subpoenas for documentation, which we now know he used in his indictment against Danchenko. And who was Danchenko? Danchenko was Fiona Hill's former research assistant. Who is Fiona Hill? The world probably remembers. She's the one who conjured up the Ukraine impeachment fiasco in her time at the White House. And why is she important? Fiona Hill connected Danchenko to Christopher Steele. a political operative in the White House connected Christopher Steele to his primary source and allowed her to get all this false information into the FBI. How does that relate to Charlie Dolan? Fiona Hill also connected Charlie Dolan, the Clinton ally operative, to now Danchenko, the indicted individual under Durham, whose documentation was recovered by John Durham, thankfully, through his lawful and appropriate use of federal subpoenas. And I think he's got a lot more coming.
Give John Durham over 1,000 other documents that have not yet been declassified that I know include intelligence that goes.
Then you have John Ratcliffe as Central Intelligence. That could be the most important person here in any indictment. Even more important than Director Patel and Attorney General Bondi. I mean, you just can't, you couldn't even dream this up. It's like unbelievable. And all because Democrats had to have 4 years of Weekend at Bernie's. That's it, they had to have it. And it was such a catastrophe. It was such an unmitigated disaster that now Trump has a lot more control than he ever would have. Had he served consecutive terms, none of this would have happened. But then again, the Democrats are morally superior. They're very intelligent, highly intelligent, but they're petulant and they're completely inept. So when you combine all of that, you get what's taking place now.
Specifically to this criminal activity that would be the basis for further indictments. And, you know, again, what happened with the Steele dossier, a grand jury is saying was criminal in nature. And I expect that all of the folks that are involved with creating it and peddling it falsely would be in jeopardy.
And that was former Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe with me last week on this program on what he declassified, which, of course, exposed that this dossier and whole Russia collusion lie was a fabrication.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I will have a live stream tonight, probably around 11 p.m., 10:30, 11 p.m., hit subscribe to this channel, to my super chat. Thank you to the members. Thank you, Howie. Thank you. And Paul Bartlett, as always. Thank you so much, sir. I'll be back tonight. Be here tonight. I had 2 uploads today. And it's going to be very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be doing 4 segments each day, like clockwork. 2 in the morning, and then 2 live streams during the day. Hit subscribe. Thanks everybody for your support. And I will see you this evening. This is phenomenal news, ladies and gentlemen.